be present. So again, right now is the best time to conduct these analyses for your areas so that they do become potentially funded, coming in close contact with these deadlines, starting with 14th of September. It's an application deadline for the Stormwater Competitive Grant Program, and NGDEP just extended the deadline for expressed interest in technical assistance and stormwater resilience planning to September 23rd. And I want everyone to start thinking about January 1st of 2023, when MS4 permits will be anew. So we, myself and Isabel Molina, New Jersey League of Conservation Voters, and our speakers are glad to meet with you after this webinar to discuss your specific plans and encourage you to connect. We will be sharing all resources afterwards, and we invite you to be fully present as we dive into this vital, pressing topic of dire concern in this region. We are recording this and sharing it on social media as well. Now I'd like to start our meeting with a land acknowledgement. Next slide, please. These are some Zoom tips, just making sure everyone is keyed into, just again, making sure that you're muted when you're not talking, but we will have time for engagement and unmuting when we have question and answer. We will have ample time for questions and answers. Next slide, please. Okay, Water Spirit begins every meeting with a land acknowledgement. So let us acknowledge that we are all on stolen land, wherever we are tuning in from today. Please feel free to find and share your location in the chat using this tool I just dropped in the chat. It's called native-land.ca, and it's a great tool. Water Spirit is headquartered on occupied Lenni Lenape land on the peninsula they named Narumsunk. We offer our gratitude for the Lenape people's past, present, and future here in Lenapehoking and throughout the diaspora. We commit ourselves to righting unjust systems and righting our relationships with these lands, waters, and people. Next slide, please. And again, feel free to drop your location in the chat. So I want to thank our core partner, New Jersey League of Conservation Voters, and their staff lead human on this endeavor, Isabel Molina, and all of our stellar co-sponsors who got the word out about this event: Camden Community Partnership, Latino Action Network, Atlantic Climate Justice Alliance, Pinelands Preservation Alliance, Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions, Wind of the Spirit, New Jersey Sustainable Business Council, Coalition for Delaware River Watershed, and New Jersey Future. Thank you. We could not have done this without you. What a great turnout. And next, we would like to offer just a moment to thank our funder of this webinar series. Next slide, please. The Watershed Institute. The Watershed Institute's mission is to keep water clean, safe, and healthy. They work to protect and restore water and the natural environment in New Jersey through conservation, advocacy, science, and education. Thank you again for making this series a priority. What we are bringing forth today is due in large part to your support. And so without further ado, I'd like to formally welcome you to this second of a series of 4 webinars focusing on environmental justice and stormwater management. Next slide, please. Today we are focusing on the nuts and bolts. And here is a preview of today's speakers. I'm going to read through their full bios now so we can keep the flow of the presentation and again, get to your great questions, which I'm sure you'll have, and get you some answers. So I'm going to start with Dave Kanan, who has extensive experience in the overall direction and guidance on financial, budgetary, organizational, planning, and regulatory matters related to stormwater utility implementation, administration, floodplain management, surface water quality enhancement and preservation, and land development, permitting, and enforcement. Dave is the first Mecklenburg County Stormwater Director. He launched and guided the program through many obstacles, including but not limited to economic downturns, significant rebuilding of the floodplain program, expanding the water quality program, all while addressing the impacts from extreme weather events and substantial land use changes due to unprecedented growth, something we know nothing about in New Jersey. He recently retired from Mecklenburg County, where he was the director of county stormwater for almost 30 years. He joined Reftelis as a principal consultant in June of this year. And next, Bree Callahan. As stormwater manager, Bree works to help local governments and utilities create stormwater utilities more affordably and effectively to reduce flooding and improve water quality. She is responsible for creating a web-based resource center, which we'll share, organizing training sessions, and facilitating a peer-to-peer network to local officials. Prior to joining New Jersey Future, Bree served as executive director and baykeeper for Massachusetts Baykeeper, and worked as legal and environmental consultant in both Philadelphia and Boston. Bree earned her JD from the Villanova University, Charles Widger School of Law, and holds a BA in Architecture and Environmental Studies from the University of Pennsylvania. Just a friendly reminder, if you're not speaking, can you please mute yourself? And if you need help navigating, we're happy to help. And last but not least, who is going to be speaking first, Jennifer Coffey. Jennifer joined the Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions, ANJEC for short, in July of 2014 as executive director. She serves as a member of the New Jersey State Water Supply Advisory Council and as an advisor to the New Jersey State Clean Water Council. She serves as a member of the Hamilton Township Planning Board, on the advisory board for the School of Conservation, and is a member of the New Jersey Society of Women Environmental Professionals. Jennifer has also been nominated by Governor Murphy to serve on the Pinelands Commission with senatorial confirmation pending. For 10 years prior to ANJEC, Jennifer served as the policy director for Central New Jersey's first watershed association, the Stony Brook Millstone Watershed Association, renamed as the Watershed Institute. She chaired the Upper Freehold Environmental Commission for 7 years and also served as a member of the planning board. She holds a bachelor's degree in communication from Stockton University and a dual master's degrees in environmental policy and environmental science from the New Jersey Institute for Technology. So next slide, and I'm going to give it to you, Jen. Take it away.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. I recognize a great number of names. I have the honor of talking about why are we flooding here in New Jersey and what the heck can we do about it? So let's go to the next slide. In the honor of it being back to school week, I want to just talk a little bit about the causes of flooding we have here in New Jersey. This is the basic water cycle, right? We all know this. Rain comes down, it soaks into the ground or not, and then it rises back up through evapotranspiration or evaporation and then comes back down again. Well, we have, as humans, interrupted that cycle quite a bit. Let's go to the next slide. And in New Jersey, we are one of the oldest areas of development in this country. If you think about our history as a nation, we are one of the 13 original colonies. So we have quite a bit of old development. And the old theory of how to deal with rain that comes from the sky to keep it from flooding our buildings, our roads, our infrastructure is to send it away, right? Just send it away. Well, what we've discovered is there is no away anymore. And in fact, there never really was. There were just less people in the way. And so we're dealing with a situation right now where our treatment systems are oversubscribed. We have something called combined sewer overflows in 21 communities where we're intermingling the rain that comes from the sky when it comes, as it did yesterday, and our freshwater streams in some cases, as well as our sewage. So your toilet flushing, your showers are all commingled. And so this is a problem. We've just got too much development in too small of a place with infrastructure that's oversubscribed. And we also have this thing called climate change, climate crisis. And currently our situation in New Jersey is that we're using old data. And because we're using old data and we're not recognizing the increase in rain volumes, our stormwater systems that we're building today are undersubscribed. So we're not managing the volume of rain that we should be managing. And we're continuing to get more precipitation, which is causing our floodplains to widen. So it's a cascading problem. Let's go to the next slide. And this is simply to show you, I know we've got at least one person from Florida here. This is a little out of date. It stops at 2001. The red is development or impervious cover. And if I had a slide from 2022, you'd see that the red continues to sprawl. So we've got more blacktop and impervious cover intercepting the ability of the ground to really infiltrate that water or soak in the water. Next slide. So our primary results from the problems of having a lot of development in a small space with the issues of climate change is that we just, quite frankly, have too much water. And this is Route 1 in 2011, but unfortunately, it looked the same way last year from Hurricane Ida, and this is becoming an increasingly frequent viewscape. Next slide. Much of our country is seeing increases in precipitation in that storms are getting bigger. So it's not necessarily annual precipitation that's increasing, but volume. Let's look at the Northeast. We've got 55% increase in rain volume that's occurring in this Northeast region out into the Great Lakes area where we're up to 42%. Certainly the West Coast is very, very, very dry right now. And when they do see rain, it tends to come in gluts, as we unfortunately have seen in South Korea and closer to home, Kentucky and other areas of our country in the form of flash flooding. Next slide. Flooding is not limited to coastal issues. We're going to talk a lot in the next month about Hurricane Sandy and the 10-year anniversary that's coming up. But the flooding is not simply a coastal issue or a Gulf issue. And what we're seeing when you look at simply the filings from insurance companies and you look at rainfall data and floodplain data is that 83% of communities are experiencing inland flooding. And so 85% of communities are also seeing flooding outside of the designated flood hazard area. So what does that mean? To me, that means our flood hazard areas are not mapped correctly anymore. The rain volume is too significant. It's coming down too much, too fast. We have too much water. And those old maps are out of date because we are seeing expansive flooding outside of those previously designated areas. Next slide. So we have too much water except for when we don't have enough of it. And that's the situation that we have this summer with a statewide drought watch. In fact, most of our country is under a drought watch at this point in time, or a drought warning, or worst case scenario, as we think about the West Coast, a drought emergency. And so the paradox of climate change is that we're going to continue to get more flooding and more droughts, and that drought can actually make flooding worse. Because what happens is that the ground hardens in such a way that it can no longer receive the water and it runs off. So your lawns, your playing fields, they all start to function more like asphalt or concrete. And so you see massive runoff, and we get increased occurrence or hazard of flash flooding when we have drought. So it's a really particularly dangerous situation. We're lucky in the state of New Jersey. Yesterday, we got some nice steady rain, so it softened up the ground. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's any more rain in the forecast for at least the next 5 or 6 days. So we'll keep an eye on that. And the rain we had yesterday is a great start, but not enough to get us out of this drought at this point in time. Next slide. So we have too much water, except for when we don't have enough of it, and a lot of it is too dirty. So that's our teaching for today with regard to what is the impact of having a whole lot of development in a pretty small space, such as we have for the state of New Jersey, with the cascading impacts of the climate crisis. So we're picking up more soil, we're picking up more pollutant runoff, we're picking up more of your dog waste, more of your fertilizer, and it's entering into our waterways because we're getting that fast runoff of rainfall and flooding. Let's go to the next slide. And so I see some questions coming up. We're going to get to the questions at the end. I want to talk a little bit too much water, except for when we don't have enough. And most of it's too dirty, and it's causing havoc on our lives. So these are some of the health impacts this is usually when we're in person. I ask people to raise their hands if they've ever been caught in a flood or if they ever know anybody who's been caught in a flood. By that point in time, everybody's got a hand or two hands up, and we're pretty impacted by flooding in New Jersey. Certainly, if your home is destroyed, there's a ginormous impact. 30 people lost their lives last year in Hurricane Ida. When our infrastructure is impacted, as you can see on the top right, that's a pipe that just could handle no more and just blew. When that is a combined sewer overflow and you have raw sewage intermingled in there, you can imagine the health impacts that's going to cause. And certainly anybody who's ever dealt with black mold or flooding knows that that wreaks havoc on your lungs, on your living quarters. The impacts of flooding goes on and on. It's not just you flood for 24 hours and it's done, and woof, it can last months, years, or a lifetime. Let's go to the next slide. So we need to start to deal with this problem in a more comprehensive way than we have. Remember, we talked about at the beginning of slide, the old methodology of dealing with flooding was to send it away. Just put it in a pipe and send it away. Well, we don't have any more away anymore. We used up all the away. So we have several strategies for dealing with stormwater, and Rachel referenced in the beginning an MS4 permit. What the heck is an MS4 permit? So that's a municipal separate storm sewer permit, and we get all new ones in January. So there's new permit language pending. That's a whole separate talk. I'm going to reference the 49th Annual Environmental Congress that ANJAC hosts in October. So keep your eyes out for that. We're going to have a whole session on MS4 permits. And we're going to bring the DEP to you. We have ordinances that municipalities implement, and then we have utilities. And these are all responsibilities. And I realize I'm at 9.5 minutes for the timekeeper. These are all responsibilities of the municipality. So if somebody tells you, don't worry about it, the DEP will take care of it if there's a problem. If you're looking at a development or redevelopment, they say, don't worry about it, DEP will take, they're lying. This is a municipal responsibility. Let's go to the next slide. So what the heck can we do? We've got green infrastructure, we've got hard infrastructure with sewage, we've got ordinances, we've got lots of solutions. And again, we're going to have a full session on this at Environmental Congress. But we've also got something new to New Jersey, not new to everybody else in the country, called the stormwater utility. Let's go to the next slide. And we'll go next slide. Stormwater utilities, I'm going to turn this over to Brianna in a second. Let's go to the next slide. A stormwater utility is really an opportunity to ask those who have a lot of impervious cover to take responsibility for the water that is running off and going away to somewhere else, likely someone's basement, someone's road, someone's business. Next slide. The stormwater utility, whoops, apparently I lost this. Let's go to the next slide and see what's there. It'll be a surprise. Oh, there we go. A stormwater utility is really an opportunity to leverage a fee and ask the person who owns that impervious cover to then pay a fee, which then exclusively can be used to manage stormwater. It can't be used to close a budget gap. It can't be used to pay for the animal shelter. Can't be used to put up or to buy new snow plows. It has to be used to address stormwater issues. Alternatively, if somebody says, oh my goodness, I can't afford to pay for that, then we ask you to manage your stormwater. Put in a rain garden, put in some porous asphalt, put in some green space. And there are lots of ways to go ahead and manage your stormwater. Next slide, and I'm going to wrap this up. So let's go to the next slide. We'll skip that one because I covered a good bit of it. These are some of the projects that can be funded by a stormwater utility. So you can fix some of that hardscaping infrastructure. Infrastructure is really easy to ignore, especially stormwater infrastructure, because we don't see it. We drive over it with our car unless it explodes and the street caves in, or we've got flooding because a pipe busted. Then you pay attention to it. That's a really bad way to pay attention to it because it always costs more money. Think about doing emergency repairs and needing to get a plumber out in the middle of the night. That's going to cost more than if you're doing maintenance on your house or your home. You can install green infrastructure, which is going to help our too much, too little, and too dirty problem, because we're then managing water based on how nature intended us to do it. And we could also do some stream bank restoration to try to keep those floodwaters at bay. Next slide. I think that's my last one. And I got to, oh, there we go. We got to turn it over to Brianna, who's going to tell us how to functionally start a stormwater utility, how a municipality or an MUA can go ahead and implement one. And I know there's lots of questions that popped up, so we are going to get to those. I just want to cut myself off before they literally mute me at this point.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. My name is Bree Callahan. I'm the Stormwater Manager at New Jersey Future. For folks who don't know what New Jersey Future is, we're a nonpartisan nonprofit based out of Trenton, New Jersey, and we focus a lot on land use and water issues, and particularly stormwater utilities. So I'm just going to jump right into it. So next slide, please, would be wonderful. Okay, so over lunch, I'm going to talk to you about the Clean Stormwater and Flood Reduction Act, which is our enabling legislation in New Jersey. I'm going to talk a little bit, like Jen mentioned, about the process for creating a stormwater utility, and then talk directly about technical assistance resources and funds that we have available in the state for folks who are interested. And then I will turn it over to Dave Keenan, who has really awesome expertise as a former stormwater utility director. Okay, next slide, please. So taking a step back just a little bit and talking briefly about our enabling legislation. In New Jersey, we have our legislation is permissive, meaning that we don't have to, it allows, but we're not required to establish a stormwater utility. The law was signed by Governor Murphy in 2019, so it's been around a little while. If established, a stormwater utility is required to collect fees, as Jen mentioned, based on the amount of stormwater that a property generates. And typically this is a function of how much hard or impervious surfaces are on the property. So it's really a user fee. Anyone who has more impervious cover would be paying more than someone who would have less impervious cover. In terms of establishment, a stormwater utility can be created by municipalities, by counties, by groups of municipalities, and by sewerage and improvement authorities. So there's a lot of flexibility built in. So municipalities can kind of tailor it to what makes the most sense for them and also reduces the costs for standing up a utility. And as I mentioned earlier, and as Jen mentioned, what's really important, and we can't stress enough, is that funds generated from the utility fees are dedicated solely to stormwater management and cannot be used for any other purposes. So that is basically what it's for. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about the law, let's get into the process for creating the stormwater utility. Next slide, please. So every municipality is different. And as I mentioned a couple of seconds ago, folks are set up differently, but there are really 8 key milestones for implementation. You want to vet the concept with local officials, and however that might be talking first with your DPW director or talking first with the Environmental Commission. You want to establish a core team of internal experts that would include all sorts of folks that I just mentioned a second ago, and whoever would be interested in who manages your stormwater currently. You want to engage the mayor or county executive or utility director, however you're going to end up setting it up, so that the mayor understands what's going on and what the reason is for looking into a stormwater utility. The next step is really critically important. It's authorizing a feasibility study to identify all of the things that you need to that would go into why this would be important for your municipality. And the feasibility study is typically done by a outside consultant, or actually there's available funding that I'll talk about in a second from NJDEP that has a stable of dedicated consultants who at no cost would be able to do a stormwater utility feasibility study. Then after the feasibility study, and during the feasibility study, there's ongoing stakeholder and outreach activities. This is extremely important. You want to make sure, and Dave will talk about this in a minute, you really want to make sure that the public knows exactly what's going on, what a stormwater utility is, why this is important, talking a lot about what Jen just talked about with the amount of flooding and property damage that, New Jerseyans have been suffering from. And then there's a go or no go decision, the implementation phase, and then the final launch. The final launch, is where you're going to be sending out your bills. So those are really the basic 8 milestones for implementing a stormwater utility. Okay, next slide, please. Now, throughout those 8 steps, there's community research that you really want to do. These important questions that you want to answer. What are the main problems facing your community? What are your community's goals? What's your current level of service? What is your desired level of service? Do you need a different structure? Do you need additional resources? And then something that's really important for folks to understand is what the cost of inaction is. It's not just, managing some of your pipes. It's also, business interruption. It is property damage. In some cases, it can be all sorts of things that go into, it could be increases in insurance rates. So whatever your municipality or locality is suffering from, you really have to tabulate what the cost of inaction is, because you're essentially paying for it one way or another. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, getting into the more detailed specifics. If you take a look at the needs and the research that I talked about a second ago are in these 2 top darker blue boxes. And you need to know about what sort of services and compliance. That's another thing I didn't mention a minute ago. In order to comply with the MS4 permit, just like Jen mentioned, there's new MS4 permit obligations that are going to be coming out in the new year. Are there particular problems in the community that you need to solve? Do you need to establish dedicated funding for this? Are you having trouble making your ends meet and actually having funding to meet your MS4 obligations? So anyway, it goes through this entire, all these questions. And then in the phase 1, you want to assess your problems and needs, define program costs, develop a financial plan, develop impervious area estimates. That's sort of what the consultant for the feasibility study will help you do. You want to select a rate structure. That's also within the feasibility study. Defining a credit program. As part of New Jersey's law, we have to have credits. So residential and commercial users would be able to decrease their fee if they're actually managing the stormwater on their property. And for anybody who has more interest in those specifics, I'm happy to talk about that. But just to keep things moving, I'm going to go into phase 2, and that's the implementation. That includes the conducting public outreach. You want to adopt an ordinance, develop your billing and credit processes and manuals, establish billing data. And again, this is something that a consultant would help you go through all the way through to the launch to figure out what you can get until you send the bills out. Okay, so next slide, please. So to be able to do this, there are a bunch of resources that we have available. The first thing I'll talk about is the Stormwater Utilities Resource Center. That's a specific one-stop shop for all that you need to know about stormwater utilities. And that's something that New Jersey Future put together. It's a website. It's got all sorts of information. The next is consultant technical assistance. At New Jersey Future, we also have a list of consultants who've agreed to participate with municipalities on a limited basis pro bono to be able to just answer some of the questions, more of the financial nitty-gritty that you have. We also have a New Jersey Stormwater Utilities Peer Learning Exchange, which is a really great closed community. It's sort of like having, it's sort of like a Facebook app. It actually has an app on your phone where you can go in and you can ask questions of officials who are in other states and consultants who are part of our pro bono list to ask specific questions. And it's a closed community. So it's only municipal officials and environmental commission members who are able to, ask these questions. And really, we want folks to feel comfortable. We know it's a politically sensitive topic, so it's a really great way to be able to get that information that you need without, having to worry about that. And then there's direct community support. Myself and some of the other folks on this call are available to come to municipalities to give educational information and talks about stormwater utilities and stormwater in general, just to educate your environmental commissions, your elected officials, your council members. So there's a bunch of resources that are available. Next slide, please. Okay. And I know I'm getting close to time. So this is the Stormwater Utilities Resource Center. This is what the homepage looks like. There's a tab at the end that says resources at the very top that has a lot of really great information. So I encourage you all to take a look at that. Next slide, please. And it includes all of this information, including public support. So next slide, please. You can click again. So one of the things that's really important is that it actually breaks out your list of potential stakeholders, which is really, the outreach is really important key part of this whole process. And it actually breaks it down by particular meeting. So if you look down at the bottom, if you could see it says meeting 1 and field trip, meeting 2, meeting 3. It talks about who should be involved in those particular meetings and what you should discuss. So that is also super helpful. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the closed community peer learning exchange that I mentioned for elected officials and for staff, municipal staff. And this is sort of what it looks like. It sort of looks a little bit like Facebook. And you can have it on your phone, you can ask questions. So, all right, next slide. Okay, and the last thing, very important that I want to talk about, Jen touched on this briefly, the NJDEP grant opportunity. So there's opportunities right now for municipalities to be able to get, and also regional counties and groups of municipalities to be able to apply for NJDEP grants for stormwater utility feasibility technical assistance grants. And these are no cost grants. There's a list of consultants that you can, that you'll be matched with. And the deadline is September 23rd. And the application is actually a really brief letter of expression of interest. So for anyone, I will drop in the chat the link to the letter of expression of interest, and I'm happy to help anybody, any municipality who's interested apply for the application or put together an application. So yeah, so that's it for me. So I would turn it over to Dave Kanan.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is truly a pleasure to be with you today. I'm Dave Kanan. I'm with Raftellus Financial Consultants, but I was the director for Mecklenburg County's portion of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Stormwater Services. I was their director for almost 30 years. And at Raftellus, we do a lot of work with municipalities and counties for water, sewer, and stormwater utilities, as well as other things. But that's, you know, the reason I wanted to talk to you today, next slide, please, is not really give you as much maybe next slide. There we go. Not necessarily examples. Bree did such a great job setting this up, and Jennifer also. I'm going to primarily focus on the examples of how to be successful and examples of where a real well-rounded, laser-focused stormwater utility can be a great asset to your community. Next slide. So building on what Bree said, it's really a couple of things that I've learned over the years is be sure, I see a lot of discussion in the chat about the fee. So be sure you're focused on the program first, and then the fee will sell itself. And I'm going to come back to that at the very end. Remain laser focused on the needs, get resources prepared. So top right corner, the picture there is a picture of a construction project. If you do it right, the stormwater program, after it's gone through the phases that Bree mentioned, I've seen a very successful stormwater program actually take a loan out from the general fund, and they go to a project they know needs to get fixed. And day one that the fee goes out, they are on the ground turning dirt, and they are automatically making a difference in the community. That is incredibly successful. And making a difference in the community is my next point, which is at the beginning, define what success looks like, and march towards that with all due diligence. As I mentioned, when you hit go, turn the first day, relate the project to community benefits. So tell the story, or ask people who live in this neighborhood, top right corner again, as an example. Hey, do you remember last week when your child was late for school? You know, do you remember when we had to shut the road down for 2 days and then everybody had to go around, they were late for work. So don't talk about projects in the engineering context, talk about them in the context of how it impacts everybody's daily life. And then explain the fee and how they can report additional problems that the stormwater program may not know about. Next slide. So stormwater utilities are not new. The oldest utility is actually Bellevue, Washington, and it's over 40 years old. So according to the Western Kentucky University Stormwater Utility Survey, there's over 1,800 stormwater utilities in the US, and you can see the data there. Average stormwater fee for single family residence is $5.87, and the median is $4.76. Just for those, remember the median is the one that's in the middle, the average is the average. Next slide, please. The other thing is that according to Black & Veatch's their stormwater utility survey, there's a lot of commonalities. Most stormwater utilities base their fee on impervious area. Instead of measuring each individual single family residence, they do a flat rate structure for residential. But when for non-residential that can have a large amount of impervious area, a lot of communities calculate those individual impervious areas. Unlike water sewer programs, most do not have assistance programs like discounts for elderly or things like that. Stormwater programs generally do not do that. And actually 54% have credit programs. And that's what Jennifer was talking about. If you want to reduce your fee, you need to go in and work on reducing your impact to the storm drainage system. The point in this slide is that when you go through the process that Bree talked about, you need to set up the program and the utility specifically to your needs, your community's needs. Next slide, please. Adaptive management is incredibly important. These things that you see there were not in play back 30 years ago when Charlotte-Mecklenburg was considering launching a stormwater fee. Affordability and equity can now be taken into account. Sometimes large single-family residential properties are actually treated like non-residential, and their individual impervious areas are measured. You need to be very careful about feel-good credits. Only issue credits to properties that actually do mitigate their runoff. Some people are putting caps on credits, and actually some are using satellite imagery and drones to pick up additional impervious area as their community grows. So that's about the fee. I want to really focus on the program now. Next slide, please. Back in the 90s when Charlotte-Mecklenburg started their fee, we thought we pretty much had it underway, right? We were all good. We thought we had a progressive stormwater program, and especially in the floodplain management side. Top left corner on the left side of the slide is building. Kind of right next to the building is a creek, and then you see a series of homes to the right of the creek. That is that's probably about 94. Bottom right is the exact same place. The bottom left corner is the same building. The creek is now meandered, and then there are no homes. And the lesson that Charlotte-Mecklenburg learned as we realized that FEMA was not going to help us out consistently after floods, is we had to start funding our own way to mitigate runoff in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Next slide, please. Well, now I'm going to get to the successful part of where I think is key to a stormwater program. So we launched the program in the early 90s. 2 big floods happened. We reset the floodplain program, and then we started figuring out what success looked like. This was after we launched the program. This was literally almost 10 years after we launched the program. And that was 10 years too late. So this is, I'm not going to go into this in detail, but certain leadership really enjoy having a plan and goals per year. So let's just concentrate on the right slide very quickly. The red line is the amount of losses or flood risk that's been reduced between 2000 and 2012. And the blue line is a capital improvement program that has been endorsed by the Board of County Commissioners, including fee increases, to continue to reduce risk in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, because the red line will tell you it's successful. The blue line is just continuing to invest. Well, how can I say it's successful? Next slide, please. Some people like to think of the context of financial, like return on investment. So the blue line is state, federal, and local money that has gone into flood mitigation. The orange or rust line at 30 million is the losses avoided to date. Charlotte-Mecklenburg actually measures how much losses that have been avoided to date because of the mitigation investments that they and the federal government and the state government have made. And for those that are more financially oriented, this is a great way to tell a story. Next slide. But there's another way that people like to hear the story, and that is truly a story. And the bottom left is a picture of a very large apartment complex that flooded in '97. That was one of the two big floods that occurred. Now I'm almost done. In the top right is after the floodplain buyout program that was implemented for this specific property. It was implemented in, I think it was about 2012. If you look really, really close in the top right picture, in the bottom left of the top right picture, you see a bunch of dots. Those are actually a bunch of trees. And so the floodplain program actually took 22 acres that used to be covered up with asphalt rooftop, but more importantly, a resident of over 200 people, 200 families that were highly at risk, and converted it to 22 acres of open space, where people went out there and planted trees. And this is where you got to tell the story. I was out there helping people plant the trees one day, and a resident asked me, he says, like, well, I've lived here for 10 years. I didn't even know this was here. And I was like, well, an apartment complex used to be here. She was, really? And so I told the story, and that's why it's really important to measure your success and tell the story about how your stormwater program, and oh yeah, that fee that most people forget about once you start talking about successes, that fee funds the program. And lastly, the two individuals in the bottom right are actually shocking fish. We're in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, which is very urban. We're seeing fish species come back. All these things, improving water quality, reducing flood losses, bringing habitat back, planting trees, open space. This is going to be a future greenway. That all speaks to the quality of life at the community. Next slide, please. So in closing, I'll just say that, get started. Don't do it haphazardly. Follow brief examples. Speak of successes, because it's really important to do that. Most people, it's going to be uncomfortable when you start billing the fee, but the benefits of the program will outweigh the fee 10 times over, based on my 30 years experience. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much to all of our speakers for those great and insightful presentations. Thank you to everybody for dropping your questions and your thoughts and your comments in the chat as well. That's very helpful, and that allows us to move swiftly into our Q&A. So typically we would allow people to unmute, but I think for the sake of time, we'll leave it just to the chat. And thank you, Carol. So, also in the interest of time, we will be picking around some of the questions. And I think a lot of the questions that were placed in the chat were answered in some form. If there are lingering questions, we are happy to answer that offline as well. And like Rachel had mentioned in the beginning, we're happy to have this conversation outside of just this webinar. We want this to be a conversation and a collaboration that goes beyond just this educational piece, right? So let's dive right in. If you could move to the next slide, it's just the question slide. Feel free to continue adding them to the chat and we will collect them if possible. There were three that I think, were really important that I would love to highlight and just start with. So Judith Hernandez said, some municipalities are fighting stormwater utilities. I would love to hear some strategies to make this non-political. And I think, Jennifer, that might be a great question for you to start with.
Oh gosh, it seems these days almost everything is political. I think really what Dave was talking about in terms of focusing on the program and focusing on the benefits is really the way to go. Look at how your community has been impacted in not just the past year with Ida, but look back on the past 20 years. And the bottom line is that there's nobody else coming to help us. Our commissioner of DEP says that all the time. We have to help ourselves. New Jersey is a coastal state. We have a lot of development. Our communities are impacted by increasing amounts of rain, and we have to prepare for that. So it's really a common sense solution to protect residents and to protect our economies as well. If you look at the days that businesses have been closed, that roads are closed, this becomes a real impairment to quality of life where people want to set up businesses. I'm a tried and true environmentalist, so I'm happy to talk about the water quality and the benefits on the macroinvertebrates, but the benefits on dragonfly nymphs don't tend to sway many mayors. So I would focus on the economy. I would focus on saving lives. I would focus on quality of life. And this is just a matter of fact. And municipalities can do the proactive thing to help their communities, or they're going to slide behind everybody who does choose to do the right thing.
Great, thank you so much for that. And another question from Dennis Whites, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. How many New Jersey municipalities enforce stormwater maintenance agreements through inspection? And is there a lack of maintenance is lack of maintenance a major cause of flooding? I think stormwater maintenance is underemphasized. And so can maintenance enforcement be an effective alternative to the stormwater utilities? Dave, would you like to take that question?
So it's specific to New Jersey, so I probably not can speak to that. But what I can say is that enforcement is a big part of a stormwater utility, because what you're basically doing is you're investing probably $1 to 10. For every dollar you're investing to get your maintenance done, you're probably saving yourself $10 or somebody $10 in the long run. So it's really important to be sure that a community dedicates a certain portion of their fee to the maintenance or ensuring somebody else is performing proper maintenance.
I can add to the New Jersey specifics too. From what we've seen, not many folks enforce stormwater maintenance. And I think that that's one of the things that stormwater utilities have been used for, is to be able to enforce stormwater maintenance, in that if you control your stormwater and you do a good job putting in rain gardens, or just making sure that your stormwater management conveyances are working properly, then you will receive a credit. And so you're reducing your fee because you're receiving a credit and you're managing stormwater. So the main reasoning behind all this is not to get a ton of money. The main reasoning behind all of this is to reduce the amount of stormwater that's being created.
Yeah, exactly. And Anna Price asked a very insightful question, and is clearly an advocate in her community. She said, what can be done to convince neighboring towns to take responsibility? I have a voice in my own town, but the surrounding towns, the town surrounding my own, added to the flooding in my neighborhood. How much responsibility is placed on developers that are removing farms and forests to build homes? Bree, I actually think this might be a great question for you.
So very, very good question. We're not, so obviously if you're within a watershed, everything that's impacting one particular area is not just that area, it's going to be the entire watershed. And so since we're not really set up as a state to enforce on a watershed level, this is obviously a challenge. And so the wonderful thing about the stormwater utilities legislation is that it allows for regional cooperation. And in fact, NJDEP's grant that they're offering right now offers up to $250,000, I think, for the stormwater utility feasibility study for a regional group. So if multi-municipal folks are getting together, or if they're going to do it on a county-wide basis, they're really encouraging folks to get together and do this, so it won't, be sort of a band-aid solution. Because you're right, if one municipality, puts together a stormwater utility and, the flooding from another municipality is really affecting them a whole lot, then, you're not going to solve the whole problem. And so I think that answered the first part of the question. Isabel, can you remind me what the second part of the question is?
So how much responsibility is placed on developers that are removing farms and forests to build homes or other infrastructure?
So there's stormwater legislation or stormwater laws that municipalities have to, that are, state stormwater laws that municipalities have to comply with. And actually, Jen, you might be able to speak more directly to this, but this is all going to kind of combine in a stormwater utility. It's something that, everything would have to make sure that it's all in compliance with. Jen, I don't know if you wanted to add.
I think what I would add there is it's inadequate at this point in time, and it's functionally inadequate because of the data and because of the lack of maintenance. So the developer answer is that they need to infiltrate the same amount of rain that's landing on a piece of property in a pre-development state as they need to infiltrate in a post-development state. It's just that they're doing it differently through green infrastructure, through detention basins, et cetera. The problem with that answer is that our rainfall in New Jersey is currently calculated based on observed data from 1899. Yes, I said 1899 to 1999, way back when I was still using a rotary phone. So we know our climate has changed pretty drastically in the past 23 years, and we're not recognizing that volume increase. So as much as you may try to make the argument that a developer is capturing all the rainfall pre and post development and that volume equals one another, it does not, because the volumes are simply wrong. We need the DEP to update with modern rainfall data. We need them to adopt the NJ Pact regulations, which you can Google around about that, and that would update our flood hazard areas to recognize the impact that climate change is having on us today. So we need to get out of those floodplains. We need to update the rainfall, and then we can start to have more honest conversations about how well or how not well the detention basins are working on our lands. And we need to increase the monitoring, and a stormwater utility is a great way to do that, to maintenance and monitoring of the systems we have. They have to be monitored and they have to be maintained. Everything has to be maintained.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answers. And unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for Q&A. So we do have to move on to closing remarks. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. I would love to just pass it over to our speakers for some quick closing thoughts. Feel free to plug both your contact information, but also any upcoming events or other information you'd like to share. I'll start with Jen and then pass it to Bree and Dave.
Oh, thank you so much. I would invite everybody to please consider attending the 49th Annual Environmental Congress. We're having virtual sessions on October 11, 12, and 13, and then a big in-person day at Mercer County Community College on the 14th of October. We're going to be talking lots about stormwater there. There's a lot to be done in New Jersey, and we're set up to do it. The DEP is at a point where they have peer-reviewed data about the impacts of climate change now, as well as for the next 70 years. That's pretty robust and approved by the scientists, who are a pretty twitchy group, and they don't tend to endorse things too easily, but the scientists are saying, yes, we understand the impacts. And so New Jersey really has an opportunity to get out in front here to protect lives, protect our environment, and protect our communities. So please come to Environmental Congress and check out the NJ Pact information that's going around. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today.
All right, I'm going to be super quick. I just want to tell folks, please take a look at the Stormwater Utility Resource Center if you're interested. Please join us on the Peer Learning Exchange if you're a municipal official. And then most importantly, check out the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection's request for expression of interest. Please do not miss the date if you are interested. Please contact me if you have trouble or just want more information about the application for the grant. This is something that's been a long time coming, and we're not sure if there's going to be a second round of this sort of thing. So we'd love for everybody to take advantage of it, and just don't miss the deadline. Again, September 23rd for the NJDEP grant deadline.
Yes, thank you. Real quick, if you still have questions after those two great resources and all the other ones we talked about today, Rafael is willing to help. We've set up more stormwater utilities than anybody else in the United States, but this is not a sale job. It would be hard for me to believe that you still have questions, but if you do, feel free to reach out to us, and good luck. I mean, everybody else, not everybody, it's being done. After 30 years, I've seen places across Charlotte that used to flood all the time, and they don't. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to reach out to myself or Rachel. We're listed as the host on that PowerPoint. And thank you so much to our speakers, Jen Coffey at ANJEC, Bree Callahan at NJ Future, and Dave Cannon at Rafaelis, as well as our sponsor, the Watershed Institute, and our wonderful co-sponsors. Just want to plug, we'll be having on October 19th from 12 to 1, another Lunch and Learn, a follow-up webinar that will be focused in on funding sources. That will mention Dave Zimmer from the Infrastructure Bank, as well as Gabe Mannon from New Jersey DEP. They will talk about some funding resources that are available to towns and cities throughout the state. So please do keep an eye out for that and reach out to us if you have any questions regarding that. And with all of that, I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day and enjoy this webinar series. Thank you.